My name is Rima Lyons-Spite. I'm the coordinator for the grant. Also, we have here Shelby Grauer, the co-coordinator, and Avery, our liaison. Though they won't be presenting today, they are here just to participate and say hello to everyone. So let's go ahead and get started. So today we're going to take a look at our new IMMEGP program dashboard. We're going to talk about some updates for CJC and for this grant program, and then we'll give you some time for feedback and questions about the dashboard and those updates that we discuss. Just a reminder, as always, we are recording today. We'll make this webinar available on our YouTube channel, so we'll send that link out after the recording is completed. I do want to note that today we're going to be switching back and forth between this presentation and between the live dashboard that's available online. And just to be totally honest, I'm not great at doing that. So please allow me a little grace through those transitions. If something doesn't load, please let me know. Or if it looks funny or you can see my notes or anything looks off, just give me a heads up and I'll be happy to try and fix it. Also, we will have that time for feedback and questions at the end, but if you have questions during the presentation, feel free to drop them in the chat. Avery is monitoring that so we can try and answer them throughout as well. So let's go ahead and get started. So first, we're going to go to the dashboard and look at it. Just in case any folks aren't familiar with CJC dashboards, if you go to our website, on the top navigation bar, there is a link to our dashboards. Click on that. It goes to the dashboard specific page, and there's another little button that will bring you to this Tableau site that I'm going to switch to momentarily. So I'm going to stop sharing and go to that site. We did include a link that goes directly to the dashboards in this presentation. So bear with me. Presenting. All right, can folks see the website?
I can see it, Rima.
Okay, thank you, Avery. So this is sort of our main dashboard page where we post all of the CJC dashboards. As you can see, there's a marijuana one now. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And that should bring you right to this introductory page. What I want to point out here is it does have the last update date. We are updating this dashboard quarterly with the data that you folks submit in your quarterly reports. So after you submit each quarter, we do a review, see if we have any questions about what was submitted, add it to our ongoing tab of all incidents or all, survivor data, and then it gets uploaded to this dashboard. So this dashboard is not meant to be a comprehensive look at all of the illegal marijuana activity in the state. What it really is a look at ongoing activities for this program that are funded by this grant. So the next tab here is our About tab. So that just gives an overview of the program, talks about what each tab contains, and then gives some definitions and acronyms. We have a few things here. We've already gotten some feedback. We need to make additions. If you are looking at the dashboard and you find anything that needs to be added, please give us a heads up. Throughout this presentation and, however you tend to use this dashboard or when you look at it, if you have any feedback, suggestions, notice anything that looks off, please, please, please reach out. Like all of our dashboards, this is something we're going to, continue refining over time. This is a starting place because we wanted to make this information, available to the public since we're all working so hard to collect it to really show what our program is doing. But it is not, it's meant to be iterative. So we absolutely want to hear that feedback from you. So the first tab with data on it, that we're going to look at is the funding tab. So this just gives a basic overview of all of the programs that have been funded. And if you look at this drop down on the top left side, it goes all the way back to the 2018-2019 funding cycle when it first started. And you can see, the map updates to show only those grantees that were funded during that time. If you click on a specific grantee, this chart on the lower right side will show only that funding information for that grantee. It is for, across all funding cycles. So in this case, Klamath, you can see they were funded 2018-2019, again in 21-23, and then in this current cycle and how much. It also has the contact information that you folks confirmed previously. If you ever want to change that, again, just please let us know. I think we'll check, periodically to make sure that's still accurate. And then you can just click on the map to reset it again. And of course, my internet is going to move slowly. I apologize. So let's look at the current funding cycle. The CBO jurisdictions are delineated by a colored outline, as you can see with this, this legend in the middle with a different color for each CBO. So if you click on that, if you click on that outline specifically, it'll give you that same, program level funding information and the contact information. For the CBOs, it's underneath the map. So just be aware of that. And then you can click to reset it. So that's the funding page, and it's just a high-level overview of the funding for each grantee from the start of this program. All right, I'm not seeing any questions or anything, so we'll just go ahead and move on to the incidents tab. So the incidents tab presents some information that you folks submit through your incident reporting. It also goes back to 2023. So I'm sure you guys remember, but we've had some, various changes to our reporting over time. And 2023, which would run from October 1st, 2022 to September 30th, 2023, and that period is defined right above the bar, is really the earliest we could kind of compile that information that was reported on various different forms into a similar format. So that's why it goes back to 2023. And as you can see, we were collecting fewer of the data elements that we're presenting on this dashboard back then, which is why we get some NA responses and some blanks. But we do still have that incident count if you look at the map. You can also select all on this map, which is pretty cool because, we publish the annual report each year that really only looks at the program activity for that October 1st through September 30th for that single year. So this starts to kind of compile that so you can see trends over time, which is interesting to me. So let's go through the different pieces of information that are on this page. So first, I do want to note that there are like pieces of writing above some of these charts, and in some of that writing are embedded additional pieces of information. Like for this one, above this map on the left side, there's the total incidents and the total count of those related to drug trafficking organizations. And again, that's what's been reported to us through those incident reporting forms. And then if you go down to the map, you can see a breakout of that information by jurisdiction. And this is just the law enforcement programs, obviously, that are submitting this data. So we don't have the CBOs displayed on this map. So if we look at this map, then the top bolded number is going to be the total number of incidents reported to us during that time period. And the bottom unbolded number is going to be those incidents that were reported as being related to DTOs at any point. If you hover over the map, like I'm doing now, like for Jackson County, it shows there's some additional information in the tooltip. including the number of people encountered on site, so that's the total count, and then the average number of people on site during each incident. And similar to that funding tab, if you click on a jurisdiction, it highlights that, and the rest of the charts on this tab will only display information for that specific jurisdiction. So let's unhighlight and look at the next chart. So we're going to look at this middle chart here. How are incidents identified? So that gives a breakdown overall of, whether they were identified through investigation, tip, other, and the NAs are really relating to those incidents that were reported before this newest version of the incident form was implemented. Directly below that, we have those percent of incidents involving code violations. So you can start to see that, most common types of code violations or environmental issues that you folks are coming across while doing these investigations, with water being the largest, electric, environmental, etc. And if you hover over the bar, it will give you a slightly, like a little bit more detail, and it actually tells you how many incidents those code violations were reported for. So the next chart on the top right-hand side is how many personnel are involved. So this is a total count of personnel, both funded and unfunded. And I think, especially looking at this data across all time periods that we're able to show here, you can really see what we've heard from you folks is that the percentage of or number of funded staff, people that are directly supported by this grant, is small relative to how many people are actually needed to do these incidents and to serve the warrants and be actually on site during an incident. Directly below that, we have information on how many incidents or the percentage of incidents there were with firearms seized by the count of how many firearms were seized. So you can see, on that chart, 80 or almost 80% didn't have firearms seized. And then there's a breakdown from there of how many were seized by the number of incidents. And I thought it was, again, kind of alarming when you look at this data all together. It comes out to only 3%, but in at least 27 incidents, there were 10 or more firearms seized. So this tab kind of shows, what you folks are coming into when you go to an incident, the kind of, how dangerous that situation might be, what the environmental degradation you come across might be, how many personnel you need there, etc. So that's the incident tab. Okay. And the next tab we're going to look at is the enforcement tab. So this is again based just on the law enforcement program data. And this is looking more at what are the results that come from the incidents. Similar to the other tabs, you can select the year you want to look at. The time period runs from October 1st to September 30th, the same as the other tabs, just as we were trying to align it with our reporting for the annual report we're required to complete. This tab also goes back to 2023. And on this tab, you also have the additional drop down to select which agency's data you want to look at. Since there's no map, we did a drop down instead. So let's look at all again. So this first chart on the top left side talks about what criminal justice actions happen as a result of those people, that count of people you saw when we hovered over the jurisdiction on that incident map. How there was that count of how many people you ran into. So this tells what happens to those people. There is some additional information above the chart. So we included, the number of cases that have actually been filed based on this, just in that chart information above it, rather than as a bar on the chart itself. But so that'll, provide a breakdown of how many individuals were referred to the DA, arrested, cited, or had another criminal justice outcome. And there is a little bit more information. When you hover over the chart, it tells you the number of incidents those people were associated with and the percentage of all incidents those people were associated with. So it's a little confusing because there's some overlaps between these categories, but there is that little bit of additional information available. Directly below that, we're looking at the property and currency seizures. So again, we have currency, property, and vehicles, and that amount that you reported to us of those different things being worth. Again, if you look at the early years, we weren't getting that information as consistently as some folks would report number of vehicles or type of vehicle. Some people would report amount. So really starting from 2024 is when we have more complete information on the amounts associated with those different seizure types. But again, with all of this, if you're comparing it to your data, especially moving forward, and you see something that doesn't look correct based on your own records, please let us know. On the top right-hand side, we get into the drug seizures. So first, we separated out the marijuana and marijuana products. We have number of plants and processed pounds of marijuana. For all the other drug types, including edibles, VHO, and then in the chart below it, this other illicit drug chart that breaks it out by type, what we're actually looking at is the number of incidents those substances were reported at. For a lot of those other drug types, it's kind of harder to gauge whether the reported amount is a lot or a little. So we decided that a count of incidents where it was present was a little bit more telling than doing a total amount. So you can see that information in those two columns in that top table and then in the chart below it. So that's what we have of the incident related data on this dashboard. The final tab, survivors, I'm going to click on that now. That focuses on the survivor information that is submitted to us by our CBO grantees. Like the other tabs, we can go back to 2023. There's some additional information in the sentence at the top here. It's been a point of interest in previous biennium to look at how many referrals were made by law enforcement, especially at the time of incident, versus how many survivors were encountered through various outreach activity or community referrals. So we put that information kind of front and center at the top here. I'm going to do all again, just so we can see the data across the years. So on this first chart on the top left, we're looking at the reason victim or survivor sought services. So these are the categories of service that folks come into and seek help for initially. So as you can see here, like wage claims are number one, employment-related housing, employer criminal conduct is also up there. If you hover over the bar on the chart, it gives a definition of what that type of service is. And then there's also the count of how many individuals that came in for that type of service. Directly below that, we have a chart showing these kind of broader categories of what type of service was actually provided. So, obviously somebody may have come in for wage claims and then ended up getting legal services, humanitarian aid, and mental health services. So this chart kind of reflects what they actually received. And the categories are a bit broader just because that's how our kind of legacy reporting was, but we're trying to expand that now with our latest version of the CBO form, so that chart may change in the future. Similar to the chart above, if you hover over the bar, there's the definition for what that type of service encompasses. Like with everything else, we did our best to create that definition based on what we had previously and what we know about the programs. But if there are any differences with how programs are understanding it, please reach out so we can make adjustments. We obviously want this to be as accurate as possible. The last chart or series of charts on the right-hand side look at the demographics of the people, of the victims or survivors that, received services. The big caveat to note here is that, of course, this information is based on what is voluntarily told to the programs. And on average, 75% of survivors do not choose to disclose this information. So we don't have a gauge on how representative this is of the total population being served. Either way, it's still interesting information. So we see here the race, ethnicity, gender, and age of the typical person being served, and they tend to be, Hispanic, male, and aged 18 to 35. So that is the dashboard as it exists now. Obviously, we're very excited to put this information out there, and we're always happy to receive any feedback you folks have, any improvements you think should be made, anything else like that. So that is the dashboard. Does anyone have questions about the dashboard or comments at this time? And you can follow up with me individually at any point as well. All right, I'm not seeing anything, so I'm going to stop sharing this and we're going to go back to the presentation because we do have some more CJC updates. So bear with me for a second. All right. Back to presentation, hopefully. Okay, so hopefully, can folks see the presentation again? The PowerPoint.
I can see it, Rima.
Thank you. All right, thanks for the thumbs up too, guys. So we're gonna move on to CJC updates. So some of you may be familiar with HB 3069 and some of you may not be. HB 3069 was passed and it basically, will change how CJC conducts the application process for all of its grants and other things as well. So specifically for law enforcement grant programs, what it does is offer, starting in the 2027 biennium, so the application cycle that's going to open next year, the Oregon Law Enforcement Grant is going to offer cities and counties one application process for 3 different grants, which is going to include Organized Retail Theft Grant Program, this grant program, and the Jail-Based Medicaid for Opioid Use Disorder Grant Program. CBOs that are currently funded through marijuana or that want to apply for funding will have a separate application process. And we're still trying to figure out all the logistics of that. Obviously, if whether they'll run concurrently or what. We only have some very preliminary information here to share. But basically, across all of our grant programs, we're going to be changing the way that we do business. And this is an opportunity for us to really look at the different grant programs, reevaluate, whether or not there should be standards, how those standards exist, what data we're collecting, and how those award decisions are made. The purpose, as it says here, is to have a singular application process to really streamline it for applicants. So that's our goal. But of course, we want to make the process also standard across all types of grants, and be consistent and make sense, and hopefully even follow a consistent schedule so we're not all, waiting with bated breath to see when the application opens 1 year from the next. It'll be happening at a set time, and you can expect your award at a set time. All of these things are being developed, but we do want to make you aware of them, so you kind of keep your eye out for updates. And as we'll discuss on this slide, well, on the next slide, sorry. So like I mentioned, this application may include new agency-wide and grant-specific processes to align with this bill, partnering with research entities on grant-related research. So, we have the opportunity to do this development work. So we're looking at like how we can bolster our information on, how effective these grant programs are, what we should be looking at, et cetera. We're going to be looking at the data you've submitted and expenditures to further refine those performance metrics and program standards. And then we're also doing a process of gathering input from you guys. We're going to be doing our, regular site visits this year, and we started scheduling some of them, but most of them will take place kind of at the end of summer. We're going to do our regular site visits and then have some additional topics of conversation around what these changes are going to look like, and to gather your feedback on that and make sure, we're doing things that make sense. In addition to that, we might do focus groups, interviews, surveys, et cetera, to make sure, our programs and metrics and everything reflect what makes sense, as I said. So what that means for you guys is we're going to be doing in-person or virtual site visits with everyone in the summer and fall of 2026. We might reach out for additional feedback through these surveys and interviews and focus groups. The next biennium grant application process is going to look different. We don't know exactly how different, but it will look different. And obviously we're going to try and keep you informed as much as possible as we go through this. So that's all I had today. We can take some time now to take questions or comments on any of this, if you folks have them, and we have our contact information here if you want to reach out. So we'll just pause for a few minutes. And if you have a question or comment, feel free to put your hand up or stick it in the chat. Not seeing anything yet, but oh, I got a comment that it all made sense. Excellent, I'm glad to hear that. Well, I'll stick around for a few more minutes in case there are any. Otherwise, feel free to send or sign off. And thank you guys all for tuning in today. As I said, we'll share the recording, and you can share it with whoever you think is needed on your end. But thank you, and we'll be in contact.
Thanks, Rima.